Turn now to Exodus and chapter 24. And in verse 4, Exodus chapter 24 and verse 4, Moses has been on the mount and has received what we have seen was called the Book of the Covenant. And now he comes and he writes it in verse 4, and Moses wrote all the words of the Lord. And he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. We will be obedient. And Moses took the blood and threw it upon the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu and the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. There is a statement of the Sinai covenant that we discussed in our last hour. But now I want to ask the question as to why. It was getting so easy, so simple. When we were back there with Noah, and it says that Noah was a righteous man, blameless in all his generation, and Noah walked with God. And Hebrews tells us how he did it by faith. Noah did what he did. And we saw that faith is that response to God, so simple. I recognize my helplessness. I make my response to God. As I rest in God, God declares me righteous, and on my way I go. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. This is the great covenants that God placed there to show us how to walk with him in this world. Now suddenly, there comes in this covenant that says, you make your decision. Will you keep this law or won't you? And all the people respond, we will do it. We will be obedient. And I have to ask the question, why? Why does God bring in this covenant of law? Why is there the law anyway? And if you've read the New Testament, you will have come up against this. Yeah, and you might not have understood really what it's saying, because it's over against all of this. But you've read about the law. Romans speaks to it. Galatians speaks to it. Parts of 2 Corinthians speak to it. This is the great battle of the Acts of the Apostles. The law of God. What place does the law have? Why is the law there in the first place? Why the law? Why this covenant of Moses? I have found that to be confused at this point is to be confused. There are some confusions you can live with, but you can't live with this one. If you have the place of the law in confusion, your life is in a shambles. Tragically, so many American Christians, their lives are in a spiritual shambles because they don't understand the place of the law and the place of grace. Why bring in the law? What is this Mosaic or Sinaitic covenant all about? Well, first of all, the most obvious and the most simple, the Sinai covenant was given in order to show man's guilt. Until the law was given, one could not really be sure what sin is. I think that's so obvious we hardly need to talk about it. God said, I will now make absolutely plain what sin is. So I bring my life up against it, and I discover that I am guilty. I am, in fact, a lot more guilty than I thought I was. The law becomes the light penetrating into my heart. It's like having a basement that you don't go in, and the place is full of junk and spiders and rats and mice and cockroaches, but you never go there. And you open the door and look down sometimes and say, I guess it's a little bit bad down there. Then somebody turns on the light and you see how bad it really is. That's the law. God turns on the light and says, you think you were wrong? Ha, take a look at this. And he brings his law to bear upon me. And of course that law is not simply 10 commands to be obeyed outwardly, but it appeals to my innermost person. And so it is a matter of my thoughts. Have I broken the law in my thoughts? Have I broken the law with my words? Have I broken the law with my deeds? And the light penetrates and shows me my guilt. I now have a measure of right and wrong. Or to put it this way, if you build a wall, you need a plumb line. Do you know what I mean by a plumb line? It tells you just how straight you are, or rather how crooked you're going to get. And if you try to build a wall or fence without a plumb line, you are going to have a fence that very soon will be tilting way, way over. God's law is the plumb line that shows me just how far I'm on tilt. Shows me how far off base I really am. So that's obvious. The law comes lighting up my life and showing me that I am guilty. And in so doing, now this is where it becomes important. In so doing, it shows to me what the nature of sin is. Now, what is the nature of sin? Put it this way, God is love. And we've taken a long time to explain that love is Greek word agape love. That is nothing like human love, but the love that reaches out to all persons, the love that reaches down even to its enemies, the love that is committed and will never leave nor forsake. God is that. He doesn't have it, He is it. God being the very foundation of life itself, then to be alive is to live in agape. Life is agape. God is love. God is life. They're all mixed up together. And therefore, if a person is truly alive, then they live agape. Man was made in the image of God. That is the original intention, is that man should be on earth the perfect mirror, the perfect reflection, demonstration of agape. God is agape, but He would be eternally united to and expressed in, manifested through this man that He has made. Man made in the image of agape. The fall of man was to fall short of just that. Or to put it in a different way, with a verse that we're much more familiar with, especially if you're evangelical and you've quoted this at thousands of poor sinners, when you say, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I quoted that for years, gloating over the fact that they were the sinner, I was saved, and they had fallen short of the glory of God. Trouble is, I never knew what the glory of God was. If I did, I wouldn't have been so gloating as I said it. What is the glory of God? We discussed that, I believe, yesterday. I don't know when we discussed it, but the glory of God that Moses said, show me your glory, show me your glory. And you remember, he was hidden in the cleft of the rock and the glory of God went by, that out radiance of God, who God really is, His immediate presence. And out from the midst of the glory, God announced who He was. What is His heart? And He said, I am loving kindness. I am loving kindness. I am loving kindness. I keep loving kindness. He said, that's who I am. If you would investigate my heart, if you would come to the depth of God, God is love. The Old Testament word that is equivalent to agape is loving kindness. It is that committed love that reaches down, which presents itself to us in covenant so that we would understand what it is. To fall short of the glory of God is to fall short of acting in agape. That makes sin a lot easier to understand. What is sin? What is the nature of sin? It is failure to act as the God who is love acts. It is failure to love you agape-like. Right? Now, you're looking at me as if you'd never thought of that before. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's one of the simplest things I've said this morning. right? Sin is my failure to act toward you with agape love. It's falling short of the glory of God. And the reason for that is I rebelled against agape love. So sin begins with rebellion at God, but is expressed in failure to love you with agape love. This is man's problem. He's the self-centered self instead of the self-giving self, the grabber instead of the giver. And once I have assumed that posture, then I am capable of any sin you want to name. And they all come back to that one definition. Every one of them. Now, if that be the case, if God is love and that is life, but man has fallen short of that and is now in himself a self-getting self, when I confront that love, I don't like it. I have noticed as I would speak to American audiences about love, if they haven't really listened to me, they will say, oh, that's so nice. I love that little message you have on love. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody loved each other? I says, you haven't heard a word I said. Because if you had, you would be terrified at what I had said. The natural man does not like the love of God. Right? You think about it. Natural man does not like the love of God. Because the love of God, agape, is the exact opposite of everything I count as life. Naturally speaking. You follow me? That's sin. Man has turned away from agape. He didn't want that. In fact, he'll go further and say it's utterly ridiculous. God's agape love is finally expressed in the cross of Jesus. When Jesus, he who had no sin, takes the place of the sinner and dies for them. To say it another way, he who is the just dies for the unjust. To put it another way, he so loved his enemies, he would rather die and endure God's wrath and penalty instead of them. Now that sounds terrific, talking from a pulpit in a religious atmosphere. Sounds fantastic as long as I'm the one Jesus died for. But if I say that that is a principle of life, if I say that that is what God says is A1 normal, this is life, this is wisdom, this is the way to live. The way to live is for me to die for my enemies? You've got to be kidding. Suddenly God's love that was so nice, He loved me. Jesus loves me, this I know. Suddenly becomes a terrifying principle of life. The just for the unjust? That's crazy. It should be the unjust dies for the just. Paul wrote to the Corinthians about it. He said the word of the cross, which is agape love. He said the word of the cross is to those who are perishing foolishness. And the word in the Greek there means moron. I mean, it's the strongest word. It's as if the world says, you believe that? You're a moron to believe that. It's saying, that's absurd. Unless you have felt something of that, I question whether you've ever seen it. Oh, it sounds fantastic. If he hits you on the one cheek, turn the other cheek. Wasn't that nice? Sermon on the Mount. I live by the Sermon on the Mount. Anyone who says I live by the Sermon on the Mount has never read it. Right? Someone comes along, grabs you by the ear, dumps a pack on your back and says, carry it a mile. You say, God bless you, let me carry it for 2. I love you. You're absurd. Anybody who thinks like that's a moron. Right? That's what it says. See, the natural man, when he says love you, see, doesn't mean God's love. He means eros, man's kind of love. Slush love, slop love, honey love, but not God's kind of love. Doesn't mean that at all. He doesn't like that. He hates it. Because that kind of love says I'm wrong. That kind of love says self-centered self is wrong. I said self-centered self is right. That's right. Every man for himself. How to look after number one. How to manipulate others for me. That's right. I look at God's love. He says how to be for others. How to wash the feet of your enemies. How to die for your enemies. That's crazy. Do you understand what I'm saying? God's love Man does not want it. It's the opposite of everything I want to do. So whenever natural man meets with God, God appears to be negative to him. Does that make sense? If life, joy, peace is to do this, but everything I want to do is the opposite of that, then whenever I meet with life and joy and peace, it looks so negative to me. I don't want that. And life comes to me and says, if you want to live, you can't do that. Oh, I want to do that. If you would live, you can't do that. Oh, come on, that's just what I wanted to do. I was just planning on that. Do you follow me? When I meet with agape love, it looks so negative. It puts a prohibition on everything I wanted to do. That's how natural man looks at it. God appears very negative. If you would live, you can't do this, can't do that. But he's really a positive. He's saying agape is life. Agape is life. If you depart agape, you're dead. Don't. Agape is life. It's positive. But when I hear that, it sounds negative. So when God revealed himself to man, it sounds so negative. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. Really and truly, it's agape speaking, but to man it comes over negative because that's everything man doesn't want to do. Do you understand what I'm saying? Man wants to do the very opposite, so agape said, well, no, you can't do that. If you would live, you can't do that. I say, but you're putting me in this negative situation. Nothing but a jolly list of rules that tell me what I can't do. No, you see, you're not hearing it. Really and truly, the Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments, they were only the wrappers. The real candy's inside. Inside every commandment is God's agape love. It's just wrapped up in a commandment. So really, 10 commandments, another way of looking at it is just God's love, God's kind of love, expressed in 10 different ways, 10 different candy wrappers. But don't get all taken up with the wrappers. Don't start eating the wrappers. Get to what he's really saying. You see, if I agape you, if I love you, I am not going to kill you. Right? See, I've undone the wrapper now. Throw the wrapper away. It says, thou shalt not kill. What? Throw away the wrapper. It says, love you. That's what it's really saying. If I love you, I am not going to run away with your wife. And if I love your wife in this sense, I am not going to dishonor her by running away with her. So throw away the wrapper that says, thou shalt not commit adultery. What he was really saying is love. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I really love you, I'm not going to steal your goods. I'm going to protect you, in fact, from those who would. So throw away the wrapper. It said, thou shalt not steal, but what he really meant was love. That's why Jesus said, and later on in the law, it says that the whole law is summed up in 2 sentences. Love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor. That's it. That's the whole law. And so I'm beginning to see the nature of sin. Sin is to fall short to the glory of God. And it's not a prison. It's not a negative prison with bars of shall nots all around me. This is life. This is joy. This is peace. We have a restaurant just outside of New York City. It's right on the edge of the Palisades where the Hudson River is, I don't know how many thousands of feet down, and it just drops right off, sheer down to the Hudson River. And the restaurant's right on top. And there in the parking lot, I've used this illustration many times, and I was there the other day and saw it again. You drive your car into the parking lot, right up to the edge, you go straight down into the Hudson. And there's a little railing there, and a sign on the railing that says, no parking beyond this point. Oh, brilliant, brilliant. And I stand there and argue, there's a command for you. What a negative thing to say. I'm coming here to enjoy myself. No parking beyond this point. All you do is put me in a prison. Oh, no, of course not. I understand the nature of the command. It is telling me beyond this is death. The 10 Commandments are the expression of agape, which is life. And he says, over the edge is death. So this is not a prison house, this is the pathway of life. But when man looks at it, because man's head is addled, man's head is completely distorted by the darkness, that when man looks at life, he thinks it's death. And when he looks at joy, peace expressed in the heart of God, which is agape, he thinks it's absurd, moronic. That's the way man is. Or as John says, men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. And the law of God shows me that. Now, it shows something else up, and this is so important. Once you got hold of the nature of sin, falling short of agape, then the 10 Commandments show me something else. Because you see, man takes on a religious bent. We can't help it. Wherever you find human, there you'll find religion. That is one of the main differences where we differentiate between human and non-human. Because man made in the image of God is hopelessly addicted to the idea that somewhere he's got to meet with God. And he will forever try and find the way to God. So wherever you find human, you'll find some kind of approach to God. Some kind. Whether it be witch doctor or guru, whatever it is, but they're trying somehow to build the bridge to God. And here, when we come to those who live in the vague shadow of what is called Christianity, goes for Christianity, we have similar. It's the same principle as the witch doctor or the Buddhist or the Shinto priest uses. Same idea, only it comes under the all umbrella of Christian. It's the kind of stuff we find in the States. So a man here is a religious bent, and the way he's going to find God. Now, of all this book, think about this. You know, of all the covenants we've talked about so far, and then go on to the new covenant, and all its glory and fantasticness, where does man, natural man, go to try and find God? Inevitably, he goes to the Sinai Covenant. Isn't that interesting? We'll investigate that further later on. But man who has a religious bent, he's non-Christian. He thinks he's a Christian. He goes to church. But I mean, he's not a Christian on the inside. He's not really born again. He just has that religious bent. He's lost and he's helpless, but the trouble is he doesn't know it. Doesn't know it. He says, I can keep the rules, just like they said. Oh yes, let the Lord tell us what he wants. We'll do it. We'll obey. No problem, no problem. And religious man says the same thing. He says, just give me a chance. Give me a chance. I'll keep the rules. I know I've messed up this up to date. I know I've done. But just wipe out my past. Give me a chance. I'll make it. That's religious man. He looks at the law of God and he does see himself guilty. But his response is, well, at least now I know what God wants of me. I mean, you can't expect anything else. Of course I'm guilty. I didn't know what God wanted. Now I know. He's given me the book of rules. Now we can play the game. Now I can be all that God wants. And sets out, now this, hear me, he sets out to keep the letter of the law. And usually does a pretty good job of it, up to a point. The Pharisees, of course, are the very best example of this. They're the incarnation of such religion. They keep the letter of the law. And I find some born-again people who are very confused by that. And they see people and say, but look how they live. They're decent, they're upright, they're respectable. They don't come home at 3 o'clock on Saturday night throwing beer cans into your lawn. They're not wanted by the police. They'd be the first ones to sign a petition to get pornography out of the stores. they're moral, they're right, they go to church, they're good. But they're wrong, because they've missed the whole point of the law. Because the law is not dealing with keeping the rules. That's like eating the wrapper and throwing away the candy. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's okay, you can look over here. Here. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the law. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't commit adultery. I've kept the law. I don't steal. I've kept the law. You don't, and you've missed the law. For the law is love, not just keeping cold rules. One might keep rules and still be void of love. And so, in trying to keep the law, they break the heart of the law worse than the person who doesn't try to keep the law. Does that make sense? So Jesus said to the Pharisees that they were in a worse condition than prostitutes and thieves. Why? Because these people were working at keeping the law. And they kept the letter of the law, but were so empty of love, they despised everybody who didn't keep the law. And so in their despising, they took the very heart of the law and smashed it to pieces. You follow what I mean? So if the heart of the law is love your neighbor as yourself, it is possible not to commit adultery, not to kill, not to steal, and still not love your neighbor as yourself. And therefore keep the rules and break the law. You really understand what I'm saying? I missed the whole point. So whichever way, I'm caught. When I stand before this law, it shows me what sin is. And in so doing, it brings me to helplessness. For in the first place, I realize I'm guilty. And then in the second place, I'm beginning to realize I can't do it. But man doesn't give up that easily. He says, I will do it. All that the Lord has said, we will do it. And that's the third reason the law was given. And this might shock you. But you can read Romans 7, and it says it plainly there, that the law was given so that sin might abound. Now that sounds strange. God said He gave His holy law in order that sin might abound. You know, abound. I mean, that means gathers interest. You thought you were a sinner? You study the law, see what you're really going to be. The law fuels your heart to sin more and more and more. The law was given so that sin might abound. How does that work? The more I try in my natural strength to keep the law, something grows inside of me that scares me. For I find I don't want to keep this law at all. In fact, there were things that I didn't want to do before, but now I try to be good, and I want to be worse and worse and worse. And I find that things arise in me that I did not dream were there. The more I try to be good, the worse I get. Isn't that the case? Unless you know that, you've never gone the law route. And maybe you're still on the law route and desperately trying to pretend everything's okay. But when you're honest, the law makes sin abound. I have described the human heart to be like a pool of crystal clear water. At the bottom is the murk and the mud and the silt. The law is the stick. And it comes and digs right into the mud. And all the mud comes and fills all the crystal clear water. And the little pool says, look what you did to me. You made me dirty. And the law said, no, I just showed you that you were filthy. it made the mud abound. It was there.